All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Marley Piper, and this is the Nature Journal Show. Just in case you didn't know, it's a show that I've been doing for several years now, at least one episode a week talking about nature journaling. And what nature journaling thing is there to talk about this week? Well, definitely the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. And you can tell by the ones that I've checked off that we're more than halfway through. So, more than halfway through the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference, just 2 full days to go. The Backstage Pass is ending right as we speak. It might go a little bit over, but I think it's 9:30 in California. It's 11:30 here in Quito, and it's even later in some places of the world. I'm just going to go through some of my sketch notes from the day. I think I filled 8 pages in my nature journal. I'm going to give you a little summary of all of the classes and try to share some funny quotes from the different teachers. So the first session this morning is the poem with Jack and the challenge. This one, he read a poem called The Animal That Drank Up Sound. So I just drew a drinking glass in an ear. And the challenge was to try to use sound a little bit. I'm in a super urban place. So almost right afterwards, I ended up writing a little poem about all of the urban sounds that I was hearing. Then later, I realized that I was cooking eggs, and the eggs cooking was, at least it wasn't the sound of an internal combustion engine or some other like honking horn or something that I was mostly hearing outside. First class today was with Jack. Super fun doing water. You can see I got really experimental with my page, which is what I think is, I'm noticing I haven't missed a single session yet. So I've basically been nature journaling or sketchnoting about nature journaling for over 12 hours every single day for the last, this is the third day. So I think I think I'm noticing like how my work and my thinking and approach has been loosening up. So that's a good sign. This class with Jack was really fun. So I tried to just, not just listen to him, but be really participatory. Oh yay, Michael's here. Yeah, it's very noisy. Uh, Very noisy. I'm not going to get into complaining about the noise in Quito. That was really fun. And then the class with Bill Singleton was also fun. And the point I want to make here, especially with Bill Singleton's class, is I almost did a Facebook Live, short live during his class. And I was going to make it come out on the Facebook Nature Journal Club talking about how to take a class where you don't have the materials. So I didn't have the gouache materials that he was using for this workshop, but there's a way that you can still follow along with a class like that. And if you're not prepared completely for the class, like if you didn't print out the things that a certain class required, or you didn't read the email that the teacher sent, there's certain approaches you can do that will make your experience better. So I tried to do the best that I could with the materials that I had on hand. And I also just sketch noted what he was talking about. So even though I didn't have the materials to do the exact same step-by-step gouache painting that he did, it was still fun. And so let me read you some fun quotes from that. Yeah, okay. So he said, I like it because it is fast. So that was one really, important takeaway, about that class. And he also said, I'm not anti-watercolor, but I do not use watercolors, which I thought was really interesting. And one of the main things basically is the opacity of gouache. So the ability for gouache to go over pale colors to go over dark colors. I'm really proud of this diagram that I made here because he first said, "Oh, this is the brand that I like." So I drew him with like just those two colors of paint, and then he kept saying, "Oh, and this brand I also use this one and this one and this one." So I just kept adding on more arms. Oh yay, Kate is here, Gisela is here, Tamara, Eli, and Michael. Hi everybody. So that class was fun, and I think I did a pretty good job. I'm happy with the sketchnoting, and I think I'm getting more warmed up from doing this every single day for like 10 hours or 12 hours or whatever. Here's myself and all of the questions that I had at the end. And then this was Pencil Miles and Chill. Don't miss it. It's the blue spots all through the middle of every single day. There's 2 more left. If at all possible, don't miss that one, because it's the one that's not going to be available at the conference. And it's the one where you get to, see other people and talk to other people. And we had a conversation, a breakout group about language. Thanks to Sydney, Rebecca, Ray Bonta was there for a brief moment. Patricia, Hattie, and Michael was also there. It was a very interesting conversation about language and nature journaling. And I feel like we still have a long ways to go. The fact that the entire conference is all in English, and almost all of the nature journaling resources are still all in English is, a sign that there's still a long way to go. And then this class was with Mark Simmons, was super fun. And you always know that a class with Mark Simmons is going to be good, like that you're going to learn a lot, but that you're also going to be entertained. So I cut open a pepper. He cut open a sweet pepper, and I cut open a spicy pepper in the Capsicum pubescens species. But it was actually really fun to paint and fun to draw. And his concepts were very interesting. Let me get some good quotes from here. So what I've been sort of discovering this approach where I do, I learned that this is called a speaker profile. I do a speaker profile, and then I make it possible to collect a bunch of interesting quotes that they say and direct them all back to the speaker profile using, or speaker portrait, using these text bubbles. So Mark always says lots of funny stuff. So I had quite a few quotes for him. One being, "I could draw animal butts all day." So that's a pretty good, memorable quote, I would say. And then he said, "Cross sections make me hungry," was another one. And then another one is, and this is one, I put a star next to it. Okay, so check this out. This is a technique that I recommend for your, sketchnoting at a conference like this, is to have some practice of reviewing. So I have a super busy schedule. I actually published it on my Patreon. Thanks to everyone here who is a Patreon member. On my Patreon, I'll show the link. On my Patreon, I posted this morning. Instead of eating breakfast, I wrote a short post about my schedule the last few days. And it's really crazy. It starts at 6:30 a.m. keto time and ends at 12:30 keto time. And then I try to sleep from 12:30 until 6:30. But anyways, I posted that on my Patreon. Thanks to everyone who's a Patreon. And now I totally forgot how that's connected. That's the bad thing about not sleeping enough and doing such a long schedule. Oh, but what I was going to say is having some sort of practice of reviewing your pages, whether it's your regular nature journal. One of the ways that I do it with my regular nature journal when I'm not at a conference is I create an index. And so the process of going through this index creates a practice of reviewing my pages. You might have a practice where, you look through old pages, and sometimes you can get dopamine, and it's kind of nice just to look at your old pages sometimes. But for a conference, having a way to sort of having some sort of symbols that are meaningful to you of things that you want to come back to. So this quote from him was more than just a funny quote. I think it's something that is a theme and a question that I have. And he said, when he started, it was something related to when he started doing cross sections to get ready for this class. He said, "It made me feel ignorant about the universe, which is always a good feeling to have." And I thought that was really interesting because it went contrary to what some people were mentioning. Other people were trying to feel a sense of competence, and the idea that competence is sort of something that all humans are going for. And in this case, Mark Simmons is actually seeking out the opposite of competence and trying to put himself in situations where he doesn't know what the heck is going on. So a very interesting, I'm trying to figure out or think more about the balance between those two things as well. And let's see, there's at least one more quote. He had some more funny stuff about butts. And then it went into another class where I didn't have the materials for, was Roseanne Hansen's class on making your own pigment and ink. And I want to point out again for the people who didn't see this in the previous days, but I've basically just been cutting these out. I printed out an extra schedule. It's really tattered up now. But I printed out an extra schedule and I just cut out these little squares with the teacher in the class. And I use that as sort of my metadata in here, and it's working really well. Another thing I want to point out that I used today is I used some venting. So right here in the margin on Mark's class, I have myself being really angry, and I just wrote a bunch of stuff about how I was distracted by the sounds of construction that have been happening around this Airbnb apartment that I'm renting. And so there was like literally drilling going on in the wall of my the other wall of my my room where I'm trying to do this conference. And so anyways, I just vented. So that's something that I think is really useful. A journal, diary, etc. It still has those uses. You know, you can vent in there just like you can in your, you know, Dear Diary one. So then the next class was with Matthias Lanus, super fun class. I got some chances to do maps. I wish there was more of these virtual field trips are really fun. Here you can see a metadata symbol that I usually use when I'm not like back to back on the computer, but it's showing that this is from the computer and that I didn't actually go to Papua New Guinea today. So here I tried to do the speaker portrait again. Didn't come out that great, and I didn't for some reason I didn't get that many quotes, quotable quotes from Matthias. The main things that were interesting was how he kept kind of simulating it as if it were a real nature journaling trip, and like the animal would move, so he would make the photo go away. You can see I did a couple different maps here. I also did the New Guinea flag, which I agree with Matthias is like a really, really cool flag. It has the, in gold, it has a bird of paradise and cool bugs and just good practice. And he recommended that if you go to Papua New Guinea, to go when there's going to be some of these cool cultural events happening there. On this page, I continue to do stuff from his class, and that was a great class. And then the right after that was, or I guess there was a dinner break. I had already eaten dinner because this is way late. This is later than dinner for me, but I did a little bit of exercise during that break. I actually wrote that down too. And then Keynote with Mike Daikubara. And so I got the chance to interview him on the Nature Journal show, I think just about a week ago. So I had done some research on him and learned a little bit about him before the keynote, but it was still really fun to follow along with that. And I got some good quotes too. He said, one of the first things he said that I wrote down was, "I'm a sketch addict." And I'm really interested in his idea of sketching every single day and focusing on the frequency. And oh, Susan, yeah, you did miss a couple bugs there. Sorry. Focusing on frequency instead of like, you know, a marathon session. And I also really like the way he uses food as sort of an automatic way to initiate a session, because I think that that idea of like what it takes to initiate a session can be a stumbling block if you're not nature journaling every day, or if you're not at a conference, or if you don't have something on the schedule telling you to nature journal. For him, as soon as the food comes out, he sketches it. So I think that's really cool. And for those of you who didn't make it to his talk, I'm going to just review a couple of these lists of tips he gave. So he talked about for tools. I really like this because I try to come up with criteria for choosing tools as well. He says, that every tool he uses needs to match these criteria. It needs to be rapid. Like you need to be able to make marks with it fast, use it fast, pull it out fast. It doesn't have setup time. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be replaceable, and it needs to be reasonably priced. So I thought that was really cool. And I like that he's kind of designed a whole kit that makes it what I use the term friction. So friction is if you have every single zipper that you have to open to get to art supplies is a little bit of friction. So if you have to go through 3 zippers to get to this pin, and then this pin you have to actually unscrew the cap, that's like a couple layers of friction. And I appreciate that in his system, he's tried to come up with things that have as little friction as possible. As little things in between him and getting a sketch done as possible. Oh, Michael, yes. Well, actually, we were going to do that part, but it is he decided not to include it because there's too much content. But Matthias apparently has been doing snorkeling around New Guinea. Yes, this is a good point. Good point, Jack. It is like a mindfulness bell. And then Judy, it sounds like Judy is already doing it every day. Wow, there's actually some great great comments in here. And then Ivea, thanks Ivea for reminding, oh, that's not Ivea's. This is, why is it not showing Ivea's? That's weird. So I am doing this still. I haven't been putting as much attention into it because I haven't had as much time, but I did create a 30-day thing so that people can keep the momentum up before Wild Wonder, hopefully, and then after Wild Wonder. So this is available on the Nature Journal Club Facebook page and on my website. And every single day I've been writing about how to use it. Tomorrow's is something in nature that made you want to call a friend. And then the last part from the keynote with Mike Daikubara, the last things that I think are important to share and that I want to remember personally are this dot technique. I remember Jack doing this, has a leaf drawing tutorial where he does this, but I always forget about it. And the basic idea is that, Mike goes straight to ink. He says he doesn't use pencils at all. And what he does, instead of, doing sort of an outline drawing underneath with like pencil, he will put in these little dots that show you where things are so you don't run out of space. So if you've ever been to like one of the bug drawing things where you start drawing the bug and then the bug ends up going off the page, doing those little dots like Mike is talking about helps with that. And then the other thing he said in this talk that he didn't say when I interviewed him last week is that by getting those dots down on the page right away, you no longer have a blank page. So not only are you creating sort of an outline and making sure you don't run out of space, but you're messing up the blank page so that it's less scary. So I thought that was really, really cool. And then last but not least, the Backstage Pass. So if you don't know about these at Wild Wonder, it's this whole blue chunk down here at the bottom. So basically right after the keynote, maybe there's like 10 minutes or something, right after the keynote that happens. And it's another thing that I highly recommend not missing. If you can stay up way beyond your bedtime like I am, it's worth going to because it's not the same afterwards. And it's actually, you can see everyone's talking. It's sort of like pencil miles and chill. And today, a couple of the things that came up, Rebecca brought up this really great quote about the human touch. The more human touch there is in something, the more human response there is. And that was a really, really rich conversation for those. A lot of people who are here were there for that. And the whole photography thing came up. So I'm running out of mental energy, but the one thing that I want to say is sometimes it's really easy for us to draw this line and say like drawing is better than photography because when you're doing photography, you're not paying as much attention. I think it depends. And in our conversation in the Backstage Pass social time, this ended up coming out from the community from various people, but it does depend. And I would argue, like from a devil's advocate point of view, that sketching and nature journaling could be similar to, you could approach it in a similar way to the photographers that are just trophy hunting. So like if you're a birder or photographer where you're just trying to get a new bird, and once you take a picture of that, you move on to the next thing, it is possible, I would say, to potentially do something sort of like that with nature journaling. I mean, I feel like I've had that before. Obviously, there's a lot of things, and I want to believe that, nature journaling is inherently different, and that we have practices that inherently make us able to appreciate something that we've seen a million times before. I believe that, but just from the devil's advocate point of view, I think that comparing the photography to the drawing thing, it depends. And I think it's a little bit more complicated. So that was, and also I've noticed that I often in my thinking and, speeches and stuff, I kind of bash on photography. Like I actually I taught a class on nature journaling at a recent birding conference, Amazonian birding conference in Eastern Ecuador. And I gave this whole presentation, and I sort of said that when you draw something that you're birding, it's way better than if you photograph it. And I kind of bashed photography. And then the next person that got up to speak, the title of their presentation was something about how photography is good for birding and conservation. And so then I felt sort of bad that I had basically built this case almost against photography. So that's it for today. I'm pretty tired, and I filled 8 pages in my nature journal, and I'm proud of it. I think I did a pretty good job of paying attention in all the classes. I didn't miss anything. I tried to take a nap, but it didn't work. Thanks everyone for, yes. And this is Bill. I don't know if this is the same Bill that spoke. No, that's not, but this is a really, really good point, Bill. And this did come up. I don't know if you were in the Backstage Pass. This did come up. So thank you so much for pointing that out. That I'll quote Bill here, because sometimes people don't read the when I share the comment that way. But Bill said, using photography as a disability accommodation can enable people to do more nature journaling. Great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And Eli pointed this out as well. I like to avoid elitism and thinking the thing I do and like is better. I prefer being humble and acknowledging that there are many paths to enlightenment. Very wise, Eli. And I think that's a very good point. And yes, Crystal is using a great word here, all caps, deliberately. Yay, Gisela uses both. Great. Yes, in the old days, we would shoot the bird. This is true. Great. Judy just came in too. Thanks everyone for joining in. And I'll do this again tomorrow. And go sleep. Sleeping is important for learning. Really good to see some people today, like Michael. I hadn't seen you up until now. And Tina's here too. All right, everybody, good night. Sleep well. See you tomorrow.